Hey guys, it's the Junior Coder, and this is part 5 of the Intro to Python tutorial series. So let's get right into it. In this section, I'm going to talk to you guys about dictionaries in Python. We use dictionaries in situations where we want to store information that come as key value pairs. Here's an example. Think of a customer. A customer has a bunch of attributes like name, age, email, and more. Now, each of these attributes have a value. For example, the name can be John Smith, the age can be 30, and their email can be john@gmail.com. So what we have here are a bunch of key value pairs. So in this example, our keys are name, age, and email, and each key is associated with a value. So this is where we use a dictionary. With a dictionary, we can store a bunch of key value pairs. So let me show you how to define a dictionary. So back in our program, I'm going to define a variable that is called customer, and let's set it to curly braces. With this curly braces, we can define a dictionary. In this example, we have an empty dictionary that doesn't have any key value pairs. Now we can add one or more key value pairs between the braces. So let's add a key value pair here. I'm going to set the key to name and the value to John Smith. Then we add a comma to add another key value pair. So let's set age to 30 and email to john@gmail.com. Now what matters here is that these keys should be unique. So if I add another key value pair here, let's set it to age to 40, PyCharm will highlight the H key because we have duplicated that, and that's not allowed. So each key should be unique in a dictionary. So let's delete the duplicate key value pair. In this example, the keys are strings, but it can also be integers. We're going to look at that later. But the values can be anything. It can be strings, it can be integers, it can be booleans, it can be anything. Now we can access each item in this dictionary using square brackets. So we type customer square brackets and then specify a key like name, and this will return the value associated with this key. So let's print it on the terminal and have a look. So we get John Smith. Now what if you pass a key that doesn't exist? Let's say birth date. So when you run this program, you get an error. It says key error because we don't have a key called birth date. Also, if you spell name with let's say a capital N, you'll also get the same error because we don't have a key with the exact same sequence of characters. Now to fix this, we can use the get method. Let me show you. So instead of using the square brackets, you call customer.get and specify our key. Now if you use a key that doesn't exist here, it won't yell at us. For example, if you pass birth date, it simply returns the none value. None is an object that represents an absence of a value. So instead of getting a key error, we get none. Now we can also optionally supply a default value. For example, if the dictionary doesn't have this key, we can supply a default value. Let's say January 8, 1980. Let's run the program. Now instead of getting none, we get this default value. So this is how you can access a value associated with a key in a dictionary. We can also update these values. For example, before a print statement, we can write code like this. So customer of name, let's update the name to Jack Smith. Now this little warning is telling us that we could simply put Jack Smith here instead of defining it once and updating it. Don't worry about that, it doesn't really matter. Now with this line, if we print the name of the customer, we should get Jack Smith. Let me show you. So when we run our program, we get Jack Smith. We can also add a new key here. Let's set the birth date to some value like January 1st, 1980. And then we can print it here. So as you can see, we can easily add new key value pairs to a dictionary. So here's an exercise for you. Here we have this program that asks for a phone number. Let's type 1234. We type in digits, it will translate it to words. Take a look. It prints 1234. My solution is coming up next. Alright, so first we need to get the user's phone number. We call the input function and add a label like phone. We get that result and store it in this variable. Now let's say the user enters 1234. So we need to loop through the string, get each character, and translate it to a word. So what we need to use here is a dictionary, because a dictionary is a structure that allows us to map a key to a value. So let's define a dictionary and call it digits underline mapping. And in this dictionary, I'm going to add a few key value pairs. 1, we map it to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, and finally 4 to 4. Now technically we should add all the digits from 0 to 9, but for now 1 to 4 should be enough. So now we need to loop through the digits string. So for character in digits, we get each character and we use it to access each key value pair in our dictionary. So digits underline mapping, we could use square brackets or call the get method. I would prefer to use the get method, so in case the user types a character that is not part of our dictionary, our program is not going to yell at them. So we call the get method and pass this character as the key, and if we don't have this key, we can supply a default value like an exclamation mark. So with this we'll get a word, and we can add that word to an output string. Initially we set it to an empty string. In each iteration we get this and add it to our output string. So we type output plus equals this, and we should also add a space at the end, so the words are not close to each other. That's all we have to do. Now finally, let's print this output and run our program. So it asks us for a phone number. Let's type 1234. We get the words 1234. But if we write 1345, we'll get 134 followed by an exclamation mark. In this section, I'm going to show you something really cool that you can do with dictionaries. So here we have this program. We could type a message like I'm happy followed by a smiley face, and when we enter it, we can see that we get a smile emoji. And if we type I am sad followed by a sad face, it'll get translated to this sad emoji. So this is another application of using dictionaries. We have this dictionary that maps these characters into emojis. So let's go ahead and build this program. Back in our program, we start by calling the input function. Here we pass a greater than symbol as an indicator for the user to type a message. We get that message and we store it here. As you know, that is a string. Now we need to split this string by a space. So if the user types good morning with a smiley face, we want to break this down into 3 words: good, morning, and smiley face. To do that, we can call the split method. So we call message.split, and we pass a string with 1 space as the separator. What this method does is that basically it goes to the string, and anywhere it finds this character, in this case a space, it uses that as a boundary to separate this string into multiple words, and then it will return a list. Let me show you. So let's store that in a variable called words, and then print it on the terminal. Let's go ahead and run our program. So if we type good morning, we'll get a list with 2 items. Each item is a string. Now, back to our program, we need to define a dictionary for mapping special characters to emojis. So we can call that mapping, set it to curly braces. Here we add a key value pair, a smiley face, and we map that to a string. In this string, we want to add this emoji right here, followed by a comma. Then we'll do the sad face, and we'll map that to this sad emoji right here. So we have a list of words. Now we need to loop through this list, get each word, and potentially map it to an emoji. So we can write a for loop for word in words. Now I want to go to our dictionary and see if we have an item with this word as the key. If we have an item with that key, then we'll get this value. Otherwise, we want to use the same word. So if the user types good morning, we don't want to translate those words. We just want to return those. So that is the case where we will use the get method to supply a default value. So we want to get an item with a key word, and if we don't have an item with that key, we simply use that word as a default value. Now, similar to the last exercise, we need an output variable. So let's define that here. Output, set it to an empty string. Now back to line 11, we get the return value of the get method and add it to our output variable. So output plus equals whatever you get from the get method. And finally, we need to append a space at the end. So let's print the output and run our program. I'm gonna type I am happy followed by a happy face, and we'll get this emoji. And if I write I am sad with a sad face, we'll get the sad emoji. So as you can see, dictionaries have a lot of use cases and real applications. Here's the solution from the last section where we created an emoji converter. So far we've been writing all our code here in app.py. But as our programs grow, we need a better way to organize our code. We need to break up our code into smaller, more manageable, and more maintainable chunks, which we call functions. So a function is a container for a few lines of code that perform a specific task. For example, you have learned about the field of the built-in functions in Python, like print and input. Each of these functions have a purpose. They know how to perform a specific task. So when building large complex programs, we should break up our code into smaller reusable chunks, which we call functions, to better organize our code. And that's what I'm going to show you in this tutorial. So let's write a simple program for printing a greeting message. So we're going to do a print, hi there, and let's add another message, welcome. So here we have a simple program with only 2 lines of code. Now let's say these 2 lines, we're going to potentially need them in other programs. So we can put them in a function that we can reuse. Let me show you how to do that. So we start by typing def, that is a reserved keyword, and it's short for define. When Python interpreter sees this, it knows that we're defining a function. Next, we need to give our function a name. That name can be anything, but in this example, we'll name it greet user. When you're naming your functions, always use lowercase letters, and if there are multiple words, separate them by using underlines, and always use meaningful and descriptive names. So here we're defining a function called greetUser. After that, we need to add parentheses followed by a colon. So let's do that. Now you know that whenever we add a colon at the end of a line, we're telling Python that we're defining a block of code. So when we press enter, the next line is indented. Now any code that we write here will belong to this function. So I'm gonna move these 2 lines, these 2 print statements inside of our function. So we can simply press tab. That will simply indent them. Also, let's remove this extra line break. That is better. So these 2 lines are now part of our greetUser function. So whenever we call this function, these 2 lines will be executed. Now let's move the indentation. So here we are outside our function. Let's do a print statement and print start. After that, let's call our function. So greet user. And finally, let's do another print statement and print finish. Now we have this little warning here, this underline. Now if you hover your mouse over it, this tooltip is telling us that you should add 2 blank lines after defining a function. This is coming from PEP 8, which is a document that defines the best practices for formatting our code. So to make PyCharm happy, we'll add another line break. So whenever we define a function, we need to add 2 line breaks after the definition. So now let's run our program and see what happens. Alright, so we get 4 messages on the terminal. First, we get the start message. Then we get the messages coming from our greet function. So, hi there and welcome. And finally, we see the finish message. In this section, I'm going to teach you guys how to handle errors in your Python programs. So let's start by writing a small program to get the user's age from the terminal. So we call the input function and add a label here like age. This returns a string, so we need to pass it to the int function and store the result in a variable called age. Now let's print age to make sure everything is working. Run our program. We type 20 and 20 is printed here, so it's working. Now look at the exit code for this program. Exit code 0 means that our program terminated successfully. There were no errors. But what if we run this program and instead of entering a numerical value, we enter something like ASD? We get a value error with this message, invalid literal for int with base 10. What this is basically saying is that this string, ASD, does not contain a valid whole number that can be converted to an integer. Now look at the exit code of this program. Exit code 1 means that our program crashed. So 0 always means success, and anything but 0 means crash. Now as a good Python programmer, you should fix these situations. You don't want to let the entire program crash just because the user entered an invalid value. So instead of letting the program crash, you should handle the situation and print a proper error message. So that's what I'm going to show you in this section. Now before going any further, look at the type of error we got here, value error. So remember this, we're going to get back to this shortly. Now, how can we handle these errors? In Python, we have a construct called try except. We use that to handle errors. Let me show you how it works. So, on the top, we type try, followed by a colon. Now, as you know, we're defining a code block. So, I'm going to move these 2 lines inside of our try block. So press tab here. Now, these 2 lines are part of our try block. So, after try, we type except. Then we type the type of the error that our program may encounter. That is value error. Then we add a colon, and in this block, we can define what should happen if our program encounters an error of type value error. In this case, we want to print a proper error message. So print invalid value. Now in programming terms, we refer to this type of error as an exception. So an exception is a kind of error that crashes our program. So if the user enters an invalid value, this line of code, line 2, will raise an exception, and on line 4, we'll catch it and print this error message so our program will no longer crash. Let me show you. So let's go ahead and run this. Age 20, everything works just like it was before, and the exit code is 0. Let's rerun this program and enter ASD. So we got this proper error message, invalid value, and once again the exit code is 0. So that means our program completed successfully. So that'll be it for part 5. If you learned something, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Keep a lookout for part 6 of this series, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.